Hello everyone, my name is Phreak. Welcome to my patch 7.18 rundown for League of Legends. For those who don't know me, I am a shoutcaster for the North American LCS, which is the North American Professional League, and I am also a Diamond level League of Legends player. So hopefully those are two things that are useful to you in deciding whether or not you like my analysis of this patch. Let's get into it. 7.18 is the patch coming out. Most notably, this is the patch that is going to be played on for the World Championship coming up in mid to late September throughout October of this year. It's going to be a lot of fun. I do recommend you tune in and watch it. LOLesports.com has the lowdown on all that information. Shameless plug, I'll be there. It's going to be great. All right, so 7.18 is the World's patch, and that's really important context because it means that basically all the changes are for things that see or should see pro play. And that's what it comes down to. The patches after this are going to have all the sort of fun small reworks to things like Xin Zhao and Azir and whatnot. We're not going to get into that though. Let's talk about 7.18. Okay, first off, well, there's small buffs to Azir. Azir is famously a champion that requires a lot of skill. His floor is very high and his ceiling is very high as well, which means you have to be really good to do anything at all with the champion. But if you are that good, you're really powerful. Ultimately, Azir is a bit weak right now, and so they're adding some very easy power to the kit, which I think is sort of the right way to buff Azirs, that less than stellar Azirs get some usefulness as well. I don't know if this is the typo, going to 450 at the rank 16 damage instead of, you know, it being a linear scaling. Either way, this basically does nothing. At the end of the day, I think pros aren't really going to be that willing to pick Azir, even though he's gotten a couple of small buffs both in this patch and about 3 patches ago to his W damage. It isn't going to really matter. That said, I do have the math. It's the top one right here. Yeah, he gets it up to a 50% damage increase on his ultimate by mid to late game. Though that said, he's going to have ability power by that point, so it's not really 50% more damage. I mean, it's possible, it's conceivable that we're going to live in a world where that amount of burst damage, the extra 150, really makes a difference in a team fight. I just am doubtful, but I guess it's possible. Cassiopeia getting some changes. Basically, her base damage on poisoning for her E goes down, and the ability power ratio goes up. This is another change in the chain of let's make Cassiopeia more of a late game threat, less of a early to mid game bully. Here's the numbers right here. Worth pointing out that E has its own base damage before the poison damage, which is what this chart actually shows you. This assumes you're maxing E first, because why wouldn't you? And so you're seeing the percent difference in damage as a result of base values, and then the one on the right is the amount of ability power it requires to make up for and then buff the actual damage of the E. Most notably, you're seeing that it takes 50 AP at level 1, which is basically impossible without completely screwing over your rune page. So this is definitively a nerf to Cassiopeia's early to mid game. Also worth noting, Cassiopeia most typically builds, what's it called, Abyssal Mask, that's the one. An Abyssal Mask, which grants a lot of magic resist and percent bonus magic damage, but not ability power. So if the Cassiopeia wants to rush Abyssal Mask, it even furthers this sort of nerf because they're not buying AP for a very long time. This definitely has value. This is definitely meaningful in that regard. This definitely hurts her early game. That said, there is no level 18 Cassiopeia in the world who can't get 250 AP. So, right, the trough is lower, but the peak is higher, and it sort of furthers the goal of, no, she's really the late game mage, because Azir is kind of a garbage can, and Ryze is pretty bad too, so this is really, really the place where Cassiopeia lives. End of the day, we'll see what happens. Cassiopeia seems to be in a spot in pro play where some pros, but not all pros, pick her. If I had to guess, I think this would actually lower Cassiopeia's presence in pro play overall, because you have the even weaker trough in the early to mid game, especially because she's buying Abyssal Mask every game. So I'm expecting this to actually further lower the presence of Cassiopeia, but I do not think she'll disappear. So I mean, the changes seem fine from where I sit. Changes to Elise. Okay, so first off, base damage down, ability power up on her human W, Volatile Spiderling, which is the AoE spider explosion for those who don't know. And then a late game nerf to Repel's cooldown. Okay, things I want to point out. Elise maxes W second and E last. I'm almost certain she maxes W second and Q. Yeah, no. She maxes Q first, W second. So until level 8, her W only does 5 less damage. It gets to enjoy the ability power ratio. So for levels 1 through 7, as long as the AP ratio makes up for it, it's a buff. And until level 14, where she gets a second point in Repel, Repel also has the same cooldown as before. So we get to our little E chart, and again, Repel's cooldown eventually goes up, but again, this only starts to matter once you're at level 14, when you get your second point into Repel, and the W rank up right here again. The AP to buff in this far right column, 33, 100, 167, 233, 300. Obviously, by very late game, right, when you're around level 13 or farther on Elise, taking 300 AP to match your old W damage is gonna be a bit difficult. I mean, you've got, what, it's like about 70 ability power-ish, or 60 from Runic Echoes. A Leandry's has, I want to say, 75 on it. Okay, you're halfway there. Okay, Runes is like 15 to 20. It's really hard to get to 300 without buying a ton more ability power items. You need the Zonias in there. That's still not enough. And you have to get, like, you know, a Proto Belt. Okay, now you finally have more damage in the W, but that's not going to come in at level 13. So her late game is almost definitely worse. It's hard to get that 300 AP. And her Repel cooldown definitely worse as well, so that's for sure happening. What's interesting is her level 1 clear is worse because she won't have 33 AP at level 1. At least doesn't buy ability power early game. She has a Hunter's Talisman or Hunter's Machete, more commonly Machete. So that 33 AP requires her to finish her jungle enchant, or at least like get, you know, a couple of amp tomes. So what this means is she can theoretically have a slightly better mid game around like levels 8 and 9, like 7, 8, 9. Because she'll actually get some ability power and not have ranked up W too much by then. But generally speaking, she's going to trough in the mid game and won't really recover in the late game. So it's a very small tap to Elise. Like, end of the day, this means almost nothing. I don't think this should change most pros' priority on Elise. She is the go-to for the early aggressive junglers. Will still be that. Not all pro teams pick her. So, you know, not every team prioritized Elise anyway, but she was definitely the queen of the early game junglers, and I don't think that's going to really change. So I don't think this, like, the numbers matter, but they're not going to affect pro perception, in my opinion. So it's almost a non-change in that regard. Fiora getting some changes as well. Okay, so what this basically comes down to is all the nerfs and then subsequent buffs onto Fiora for the last like 3 months have all been reverted. She's back to the old version that she was when she was like a 52% win rate champion in solo queue. Seen a little bit in pro play, but not a lot. And was generally like the source of complaint for a lot of people on message boards online. End of the day, and this is the same as what's being set up here, is Bramblevest exists, and it makes it a lot easier for the tanks to survive the matchups against her. And so just by Bramblevest existing, and by the way, like even the bruisers like Renekton and Kled and stuff are still happy to buy a Bramblevest in this matchup. Like, it's fine. They don't mind. So that in and of itself, the inclusion of Bramblevest at 900 gold and then Thornmail for the completed item, it definitely nerfed Fiora, who is very much self-sustained reliant. Like, the reason Fiora is good is because of triggering vitals and getting health back. And if that no longer happens, or it gets cut in half, that's really meaningful. So, end of the day, yeah, okay, all the buffs and nerfs to Fiora got reverted, but she's in a world where it's much harder to survive and thrive. So, I mean, I think this is fine. I mean, I kind of liked the design intent of making her have to trigger her R vitals to get the move speed. Designer decided that, you know, I should go for a full revert and look from there. I mean, Fiora's probably a little bit strong in solo queue as an end result, and I mean, maybe you'll see her get played in pro play. I mean, I think she's definitely pickable. I think she should be playable into like a Maokai or something. We'll see what happens though. Small nerf to Mini Gnar. Gnar definitely is a very, very strong champion. He's gotten several buffs over the last few months. He got some boomerang damage. He got bonus range on Mega Gnar's Leap, Crunch I think it's called, and so that definitely made him stronger. And basically they're just trying to continue to add weaknesses to Mini Gnar. Generally speaking, Gnar should be weak to fighters like Renekton, Kled, Fiora, things like this, because Mini Gnar is abusable. Mini Gnar is generally a weak form. Like, you can harass the tanks down, but you should generally die to like an Aurelia or Renekton all in, and so the 30 base health cut is supposed to help continue that trend continue that trend. And so here's a quick table on how much health he has, and you can see it's actually a pretty decent cut. Now, of course, this does not count runes and masteries. Gnar could often run scaling health seals. He's going to buy, you know, a Doran's Shield or Doran's Blade at level 1 pretty often. He's going to buy himself, you know, a Phage and get a Black Cleaver and a Frozen Mallet pretty quickly into the game. So, you know, at a certain point, his health is going to be quite a bit higher. But you can see this guy only gets 1600 health by, like, endgame as mini Gnar. It's a pretty small number. Either way, though, base health down by 5% is definitely meaningful. And again, this is a continued idea of trying to amplify weaknesses to make a nerf work. Mini Gnar can be dove under turret. Absolutely the case. Should be diveable. This should be meaningful. Is Gnar still going to be picked in pro play? Absolutely. This is not by any means removed from pro play, but the hope is, you know, when you see a Gnar get blind picked and then people pick like Renekton and Jarvan and go dive the guy, Gnar's more likely to die when that happens. It'll, you know, take one less auto attack to kill, and sometimes that's all you need for the dive to work. Gragas has been seen as a very top-tier jungler. These nerfs feel... I think they're actually really big. I don't think it removes Gragas from the game, from pro play. Basically, right, 3 armor nerf. We can look into that real quick. Here's what it is. Here's the table right in the middle. It is a roughly 2.5 to 1.5% increase in damage taken. Most professional Gragas players do not run armor seals in any way, so these numbers are accurate. A lot of people in solo queue do run armor seals just because, you know, the game is kind of hard. And so this means less for solo queue than it does for pro play because they're already running runes anyway. If the pros really, really need like the extra Gragas stats in the early game, they can cut 3 scaling health seals and run 3 flat armor seals, and then they lose out on like 18 health per level or something. It's actually much less than that. It's like 2 health per level or something. Either way, I don't think this is huge. It matters, right? Like this exists. It moves the needle. How can it not? It's a number change to the champion's base stats. But I think Gragas would very much still be a completely pickable champion in pro play. So again, priority goes down very slightly. And I mean, I'm repeating myself a lot. This is what all the changes are supposed to do. Like the goal of all these changes is to be a very minor love tap to say, okay, maybe you don't play Gragas quite as much. How this other champion waiting in the wings is also as cool. You want to play this instead? Maybe. Who knows? Again, I don't think any of these champions in any of these cases are getting removed from pro play or suddenly become the #1 champion in pro play, but you know, they exist. Okay, so Body Slam also getting some pretty big changes. The indicator will actually look appropriate for how big Body Slam's actual hitbox is, so that's going to look like a buff. But basically, pretty substantial nerf to his hitboxes by 30 range and by the 20 range offset. Now, keep in mind, 1 unit of range, like your champion's movement speed is like 325. And what that means is you cover 325 units in 1 second of movement. So think about how far a like level 1 Ashe moves in 1 second. Okay, that's 10 times this radius change right here, right? Like the total change here is 20 plus 30 is 50. So it's an Ashe moving for like, I'm already blanking on the numbers, doesn't matter. Either way, it's not very much, like 0.2 of a second or something like that. Now, it still matters. That's still distance. Again, it's still a numerical change. I'm going to fully expect that a lot of pros are going to whiff Body Slam. I want to take an aside real quick and talk about nerfs that happened to Thresh in, I want to say 7.16 or 7.15, where they removed the stun off the back half of Flay. It wasn't supposed to be there. It was an accident. It was a bug. And so they removed the stun off of it. And I remember seeing a couple of pros tweet out, "Ooh, wow, that was E feels different now. The Flay feels different now because it no longer stuns. Yeah, you can't E into Q anymore on Thresh." His win rate went down like 2.5% or so in solo queue. Not 2.5, maybe 1.5 to 2% in solo queue. It was a really meaningful nerf. And then Thresh remained a great top tier, well, yeah, a great champion in pro play. Right, the nerfs didn't really change pros' goals or picks around the champion in any way. This feels similar for Gragas. This feels like it's going to feel different. It is objectively weaker, but Gragas still does Gragas things. Like, you can still Body Slam, Flash, and ult. You can still, you know, your clear speed is no worse. You're doing all the same things. I'm pretty sure the damage radius on the E, actually it could be, I don't want to actually say the wrong thing here. There's a decent chance that the damage radius is unaffected. I'm not certain. My instinct is the damage radius is not affected by the hitbox change. I could be very wrong here, but I think that's what's going on here. Either way, again, Gragas probably still totally fine. Okay. Small buffs to Ivern. I think Ivern will be pickable in pro play. I don't know if he will actually get played. We did see him some in the European LCS regional qualifier. I think he's definitely a pretty strong champion. He's like above 50% in solo queue. He will remain that way, obviously. The logic behind these nerfs, or sorry, these buffs are basically that Ivern had been nerfed on his kit. His items also got nerfed as well, with things like Redemption or Ardent Sensor and whatnot getting weaker. End of the day, I mean, Ivern is still above average in solo queue, so, you know, I don't think there's... Excuse me. I don't think there's that much concern for his actual health. And he's even seen pro play, so these almost don't seem like needed nerfs. And in fact, with Cinderhulk getting nerfed, that's later on in the patch, you know, nerfs to Gragas, nerfs to Jarvan down here, you know, nerfs to Elise right here. Like, Ivern might just become like a top 5 jungler in pro right now. Like, Ivern is basically invisible in pro play right now. These nerfs aren't gigantic, or this is his damage going up, so his supportive aspects have not changed in any way at all. He just does slightly more damage, which you don't pick Ivern for in the first place, so it's very easy for someone to say, well, I don't pick Ivern for damage, why do I care? But damage is still damage, and it's still useful, it still matters. So, I mean, I think Ivern, I mean, already was, but certainly still is going to be pro pickable. We seem to be heading into a, you know, there's a decent chance we're going to be in a hyper carry sort of metagame where everyone wants to play hyper carry, is going to pick around that, which might also raise the stock of Ivern because everyone wants to play Twitch and Kog'Maw, and you know, they still want to play Alistar in the bot lane. They then have Ivern for the Ardent Sensor. You know, maybe that happens. I don't know. Either way, pickable champion, definitely strong on solo queue. Will remain strong in solo queue. It's obviously getting buffed, so why wouldn't it be? If you want free elo, you can probably just play Ivern in solo queue. Nerfs to Jarvan, 5 base value off the shield, and then the level up incentive on the per champion health is half. Now there's still a level up incentive for the slow value, there's a level up incentive for the base shield value. Anyway, here is a giant, oh yeah, here's the numbers in the Ivern stuff, right? It, you know, great. It doesn't really matter for most people. Okay, here's a big table of Jarvan numbers. Let me scroll so I don't cover the numbers up. Okay, this is where we are. So you only learn W at level 3. And the 5 flat shield difference, this is, by the way, if you're jungling, for example, right? There are no champions around you. Your flat shield is this amount, and it gets scaled by nothing. You're getting 8% less shield in the early game, so you're taking 5 more damage, right? Every shield you're taking 5 more damage. This is what it means. Great. Okay. This is the change to the percent health per nearby enemy change. This is the second nerf, right? Obviously, until you hit rank 2 of the ability, which is at level 8, there's no change, and it's, you know, 10%, 17%, 12%, 25%, 22%, sorry, 17, 22, 25% weaker. There we go, numbers. This only counts Jarvan's base health. Now, these ratios will remain the same because it's percentage of total health, not bonus, so everything that you buy is going to flood in the exact same way. So the base value of the shield is 3% lower, and the part that scales off your health eventually is 25% lower. I am almost certain that most pro players max W second on Jarvan. Now, in solo queue, people are actually still maxing E second quite a lot in both top and jungle, so this might not affect your solo queue quite as much. Very strong in solo queue anyway. He's probably still going to be super strong after the nerfs. In pro play, this was like a first pick worthy champion in the first place, and they're often maxing W second for the tankiness, right? They're going Cinderhulk and all that stuff. What I really want to point out though is the relationship between these numbers, because here is 5 enemies around you, the new numerical difference, and you're going to see that this used to be just at base health a 585 point shield just from base stats. Now that required 5 enemies around you. That is unlikely to happen. Let's be real about this. But this is kind of the situation that you're in, where again the nerf of just 5 flat armor is not nearly as much as this nerf, or 5 flat health, sorry, is not as much as this nerf on the per target stuff. The value of this nerf, the impact, the amplitude of this nerf goes up the more items he has, right? And keep in mind, in pro play, people are going Cinderhulk on Jarvan, they're getting a stone plate and popping that active, they're doing all these things to be really, really tanky. So that's all still going to exist. Most likely, maybe we see Warrior Jarvan, I'm not sure. Either way, this nerf actually means more than the numbers look like for a 5-man ulti if they're building full tank. Anyway, End of the day, he still does Jarvan things, of course. Even the shield being 100 points weaker at this stage, I think he's still a very strong champion. So Jarvan might... Actually, there's a decent chance Jarvan is no longer first pick worthy. I think he's still a clearly viable jungler. I think his nerfs were more than Gragas' nerfs. I think his nerfs were more than Elise's nerfs. So I think this lowers his relative stock quite a bit. I think Jarvan, again, is clearly still viable. And again, the fact that this nerf was very small and this nerf only matters when a lot of people are around you, I think his top lane is less affected. If you're maxing E second, it's less affected. Still, I think, viable in pro play, but I think definitely stock drops some. Nerfs to Kalista. Kalista's been, I actually don't have the numbers on hand right now. I could look them up, but she's been one of the top 3 bot lane marksmen for several patches in a row now. Very highly prized, really, really good laning phase. And I know the design team is considering either nerfing her base stats to nerf her laning phase and a nerf her general solo queue power, or to have a nerf aimed more at pro play, which is this nerf, which is mostly just aimed around the ultimate. Of course, this nerf can still affect solo queue, so probably lose like 0.5% of win rate as a result of this for solo queue. I think Kalista still remains probably queen of the dog pile. The only other marksman getting nerfed this patch is Tristana, and I think Tristana's nerfs are arguably a little bit higher, a little bit stronger than this nerf. I mean, Kalista's still going to do Kalista things. I think she's definitely going to remain a top 3 pro play pick. And again, I don't think the design team is trying to do very heavy things, but end of the day, like, pros are not going to change their pick rates because of this. I don't think the nerf is big enough to make them realize, oh my gosh, this champion sucks now. They will definitely feel this 30-second nerf in the ultimate cooldown. That's 30 seconds more at all ranks. They will definitely feel that. And so, you know, when they get into scrims in 7-18, they're like, oh, wow, the Alistar still died. And, like, there's a chance that they feel it so much, they say, let's just lower the priority. I just don't think so. I feel like pros are still going to play her as, like, the top 3 marksman in the bot lane. But maybe I'm wrong. We'll see what happens. Here's the percentages. 125, 133, 150. Great. Doesn't mean that much. All right, buffs to Lee Sin. His Safeguard is getting a pretty substantial buff to the amount of shield it gives. Now, Lee Sin's almost always, at least in pro play, max W second. Technically, the level incentive of W has gone down slightly. You're getting a lot of your points right at level 1 already, so there is some small chance that Lee Sin's change their skill order. I doubt that highly. In solo queue, I guess you're more likely to see E max second, but again, I still think you're supposed to max Safeguard. Either way, here's the numbers. It's actually pretty substantial, right? Getting that 15-point higher shield is actually pretty nice, considering that Lee Sin is going to use W 2 to 3 times per camp when jungling. He will be much, much, much healthier as a result of these changes. This is, I think, very substantial to his early game, to his jungle clear. This is, I think, really meaningful. You don't get a second point in shield until level 8. By that point, you can self-sustain everything. So the first 7 levels, this is a substantial change to his durability in the early jungle. Again, it's 15 health per camp, times 1 to 2 times per camp. Like, this is a lot. I think we saw Lee Sin a little bit already in pro play. I think he almost certainly comes back as a result of these changes. Lee Sin is a champion that pros love to play. I mean, he's really fun. He's a really, I think, a good design. He's fun to watch as well. I think it's good when Lee Sin is in pro play. He will still be weaker than the average champion in solo queue. Like, he's at like 47% right now in solo queue. He won't be up to 50 as a result. That said, you can still play the champion. I'm not saying, you know, how dare you play a sub 50 champion in solo queue, but he's not going to be overpowered. I think he'll be playable in pro, and as a result of, you know, 3 or 4 other junglers getting nerfed, Cinderholt getting nerfed, Lee Sin getting these buffs, I think we should absolutely see him in pro play as a somewhat regular pick. Almost definitely not top 4, but I think he will not be a surprise to see is kind of the situation we're going to be. You know, it's like, I'm thinking of like champion, you know, like Twitch is like pretty rare in pro play, but you're not like, oh my gosh, it's Twitch, what a shocker. I think Lee Sin is kind of in that sort of world. Now, I know the internet loves to complain about Twitch and Lee Sin, and I don't want that to bias the conversation, but I think he's going to be totally viable. All right, Lucien getting a 4-3-2-1 0-second increase on his E cooldown. There were a lot of other changes that were considered. This is the one that came out. I think this is the right choice. Lucien was definitely I mean, I don't think he was bonkers, but he was a stronger than average mid laner. Again, it's a love tap. This is not huge, but it's, I think, meaningful. Lucien maxes E second, by the way, so this nerf is most heavy until level 8, or heaviest until level 8. By level 13, the nerf goes away, except for the fact that you had to lane with a weaker ability up until that point, so you probably earned less gold and experience. So that the nerf will play through the end game regardless. The actual numbers, and so what I did is I looked at the base cooldown, which is 22 to 0% longer, because it's the same at the max rank. Okay, sure. And I said, okay, what if you E and then auto to champion, and you got your 2 light slinger shots, which is a 4-second cooldown reduction? Okay, well, the nerf is actually bigger, because a 4-second difference at 14 is bigger than a 4-second difference at 18, obviously. Okay, so sure, if you're actually all-inning, now it's even harder for Lucien to have the way out after an all-in. Like if you E auto, Q auto, okay, well, maybe, it'd be even closer to being fully reset on the old version, and there's still 4 seconds added on to the new version. So really is quite meaningful. It's actually more meaningful in practical application for Lucien. And then I said, okay, well, his normal build has a Black Cleaver in there, right? He goes Blade of the Ruin King, Black Cleaver my mid game, and then in from there. Now, this is a bit of a misnomer, or it's a bit of an unfair table to include, because by the time you have Black Cleaver, you're practically level 13 already. Maybe you're like level 11 or 12, like you're not quite maxed out on E, but like the rank 1 value you should completely ignore, because there's no way you're getting Black Cleaver at level 8. Maybe you're running CDR runes, so like you can look at some of these numbers, but what's really worth pointing out is even if you're doing percentage cooldown reduction, it even further exacerbates the nerf, because right, your resulting cooldown would be even shorter, and that 3.2 second cooldown increase is still a really big deal. I mean, look at things like this, where you've got the 1.6 second longer cooldown. Like this is E auto, Q auto. I mean, this would be 4.8 versus 6.4, which is a pretty substantial margin at that point, where E auto, Q auto, it's basically back up by the time your culling is done channeling afterwards, and it wouldn't be after the nerfs. So, I mean, this definitely does affect his laning phase. It affects his mid game until level 13. This is another thing where pros are going to feel it. Like in actual power, I mean, I think this nerfs him maybe 1% win rate. This is something that pros are going to feel, though. They're going to notice that the E feels like it's never up anymore, and oh, it's so difficult to, like that's going to happen, and pros are going to notice this about Lucien. They're going to have a death where they would have had the E up before in a scrim and say, you know what, screw it. This is the kind of nerf where the perceived impact is larger than the real impact. I don't think it removes Lucien from the game, but I think it drops him a peg at least. And yeah, I mean, that's just what it comes down to. Lucien definitely drops the peg as a result. There are some very, very minor buffs to Nautilus. The reason I say this is Nautilus maxes Q last, at least in top lane. In support, it's debatable. So if you're going to play support, Nautilus is a buff for him. You're probably maxing W and Q. Excuse me. And so the 40 mana you're getting back for maxing Q is definitely meaningful. But for top lane Nautilus, it does not matter until level 14. And at that point, you've got a Frozen Heart or something, and you've got the mana pool to sustain this regardless. So it means almost nothing for top lane Nautilus. This, I think, literally means nothing for top lane Nautilus. This change means a little bit. All right, you're getting 30 mana back. If you queue into a wall, this can matter for Nautilus. I don't think it's going to make pros try him out anymore. I think Nautilus is still an incredibly fringe top lane pick. And considering, Maokai didn't get any nerfs, and I guess Gnar got some nerfs, but I don't think it's gonna bring Nautilus into the fold, right? With Fiora getting some buffs, I don't think we see Nautilus at all at Worlds, unless it's a fringe support pick. But I don't see why you do that. The only engaged support getting nerfed is Recon, and you can still play Alistair and Thresh and Blitzcrank and everything else. So I just don't see it. I also think his damage is too low to actually kill a Janna lane, so I just don't see Nautilus getting played at Worlds. Which is okay, but I mean, these nerfs could have definitely been bigger, or buffs could have been bigger. This is a cool change. Okay, so Nidalee is this is actually playing into a playstyle we started seeing with Nidalee. So 0.05 to 0.1 ability power increase on her E. So what we've been seeing more and more from Nidalee is she starts with the Runic Echoes. Maybe she goes for a Lich Bane or a Zonius or something, right? But she starts her early game the same way she started her early game. She power clears, she tries to get some ganks off, tries to take away farm for the opposing jungler, tries to snowball ahead. And then she goes Ardent Censer and or like Athene's Unholy Grail, and she becomes a support. So unlike Ivern, who's a support the entire time, Nidalee is an early game terror who becomes a support and buffs a marksman with an Ardent Censer plus the Primal Surge attack speed. And that's really good because she gives like, it's like 80% attack speed or something on the base ability, plus 25 from Ardent Censer, plus, you know, the life on hit that Ardent Censer gives, plus the actual heal this ability gives. I mean, it's really kind of bonkers. And this plays up that role. I mean, Nidalee is right now a fringe pick in pro play. Most teams do not play her. She's also hard to play. I think there are going to be plenty of junglers at Worlds who don't know Nidalee and thus never play the champion, or never played Nidalee and are so bad at it that you see it on the world stage and it looks freaking garbage. Right? There's a reason there's only like 3 players who played Nidalee this year in pro play, or this split in pro play. She's hard. She's fine. This makes her better. So I think, I mean, as we've already seen, Nidalee was already pickable in pro play. I think Nidalee becomes solid to strong in pro play as a result. But I think, again, I'm expecting some of the junglers at Worlds to not be able to play Nidalee. And that's what it's going to come down to, is that not everyone's going to be able to play this champion, even if she's good, and I think she is. Just for some numbers comparisons, this is, this is if you don't know how Nidalee's E works, by the way, you're noticing this ability power could be doubled as a minimum and a maximum. Nidalee's heal has a minimum value, and it can be up to doubled based on how injured your target is. So this table chooses the fully injured target numbers for the healing. With, you know, the high level of the ability power ratio, the high level of the base, and you're seeing that again, because it's a 0.1 AP ratio increase at the maximum value, you're getting 10 more health per 100 ability power. And you're seeing at, you know, the early game, of course, it's an 8% increase. By mid to late game, it's more like a 3% increase. Nidalee, I believe, maxes E second. You max Q first, you max E second, you max W last. That almost definitely will not change as a result of these changes. I don't see why it would. So you're using this rank 1 value of going from 125 to 135 for the first 7 levels of the game. At level 8, you rank it up, and at 10 and 12 and 13, you get your final point. Again, it's 10 health per 100 ability power. It definitely moves the needle some. I think, again, it buffs Nidalee in a pretty comfortable way. She probably gains like 0.5% win rate in solo queue. Maybe a full percent. I don't think it's going to be that much. And again, definitely going to be a viable champion in pro play. Oren is interesting. I'm going to first scroll down past the buffs he's actually getting this patch and look at this. So he got 2 different hotfix buffs, 2 different sets of hotfix buffs during this previous patch. So he got a bunch of health. He got some health regen. He got some health regen. He got some attack speed. His Q spawned quicker. His W gained some range, his W lost some slow, his E, okay, I guess lost a knockback, his R gained some cooldown. And as a result of all of these changes, and as a result of people learning Oren over the last 3 weeks, Oren went from a 31% win rate champion at release to about a 42 to 43% win rate top laner. So via learning the champion and hotfix buffs, he gained about 11 to 12% win rate. So he's sitting at about 43. Now, 43 is obviously very low. It's very low. Now, some champions take longer than others to learn. I think Oren is still a learn to play the champion over time kind of guy. I think people are still not using his passive appropriately. They're still missing his combos. They're still not team fighting quite right. But the learning part of the skill curve started to taper off. He might gain a couple more percent over the course of time without any more buffs, but he's probably going to stay 45 or lower without buffs. So there are buffs coming in. This, I think, is actually the most meaningful of the buffs. Your teammates can no longer buy his Masterwork upgrades until Oren himself hits level 13. Buying the upgrades early game was a trap. The stats were generally gold efficient, but completed items are almost always more than just gold efficient, right? Think about spending 1,000 gold on just AP versus spending 1,000 gold towards finishing a Zhonya's Hourglass. Right? One of these means way more than the other, and it's the one that has the Zhonya's Hourglass at the end of it all. So people were trapping themselves by doing this. So now, until Oren is 13, you can't buy these items. This is very, very good. I think this is a very useful buff. This will nerf support Oren a little bit, because it takes a long time for support to get level 13, and it might be the case where you've got a Renekton who's at full build, wants to upgrade his Black Cleaver, and can't do it. Potentially this nerfs support Oren. Probably not by as much as it buffs the rest of them, but technically this can be conceived as a nerf. If everyone is actually smart, it's only a nerf, but people are dumb, so it's a buff. That's what it comes down to. This, by the way, is not a gold efficient upgrade. 30 ability power is worth 650 gold, roughly, and 15 armor is worth 300. So this is 950 gold worth of stats for 1,000 gold. Do not buy these items early. They are not gold efficient. The Zhonya's Paradox is an example of this. Again, if you get to late game, great, here you go. Even though mages now have a second item they can buy as an upgrade, you cannot get this and Death Cap. Again, you're limited to only one per champion. Please don't get a Zhonya's Paradox early on. It's terrible. And then there's actually a very minor buff here to Oren, which is that R1 travels a bit faster, which is a minor buff. I mean, at the end of the day, like, these mean... I don't think this means a ton for Oren. I mean, I think at the end of the day, Oren probably gains 1 or 2% win rate. I think you're actually probably going to see a win rate dip on the day 1 of the patch, because people are going to say, ooh, look at all these buffs Oren got, and not realize they already got them, that he already got these buffs, and bad Oren players will play Oren. So I think you'll see a dip day 1, but I mean, I think this puts Oren's like true win rate at like 45, 46% by the end of the patch. It's maybe a bit lofty. No, I think it's actually fair. 45, 46 at the end of the patch. Once you know, we've settled out of bad Orens playing Oren some more. And he gets pretty close to being a viable champion at that point, so that's cool. Changes, mostly nerfs to Recon. Okay, so Recon in some pro scenes, most notably Korea, is like the #1 support in League of Legends. He is the only support getting direct nerfs in this patch. They're pretty small, but they're also still meaningful. So first up, Grand Entrance is changing the equation on its move speed. So instead of you having to do math, don't worry, I got you covered. Here you go. So the top table is Recon's base move speed, the W speed in the old version, the W speed in the new version, and the difference that entails. The very first number, the 335, this one up here, that's his base move speed. Level 1 Recon walking the lane, W is buffed. W is stronger at levels 1 through until you buy boots. So laning phase, actually buffed, directly buffed. At boots 1, it's 360, and it's 99.9% as good. That's the same number. It's off by 2. It's never going to matter. So at boots 1, he's the same champion. 380 is boots of just any tier 2 boots, like cooldown boots or like Ninja Tabby. Okay, it's 0.7% slower, not meaningful at all. What you're looking at right here is the 675. This is boots of mobility plus your R before diminishing returns. I could have done the math that included having insanely high move speed diminishing returns. Oh well, I didn't include that. Now you've actually got a 9% cut in the move speed that this provides when you're going for the RW combo. That's where the meaningful nerf comes in. The RW is less reliable. It is still incredibly fast. You are still, I think, insanely likely to hit confirm every single time. But technically, it is slower when you're going for the RW dash-ins. Some of you may not have even known that W moved faster based on its move speed. Well, now you do, but it scales with it less than before. Whatever. The bigger nerf is this one. So even though the cooldown is going shorter by 0, 10, 20 seconds, the radius going down is actually pretty meaningful, again, for the same reason of the RW combo, right? Here's the cooldown difference. I didn't include the radius because it doesn't really matter for this kind of table. In the mid to late game, your RW, the R charm is a smaller radius, so you might miss the target you jumped onto, and the W is a little bit slower by, again, 9% roughly. A bit less than that because of diminishing returns. There is now a possibility that pros can get away from Recon's RW. Seems unlikely. Much like Gragas, though Gragas' hitboxes got smaller, he still does Gragas things, and Recon still does Recon things. I don't think this makes a huge change. I think this ends up actually being probably a small nerf to Recon in solo queue. He might lose like 0.5%, but not much. And in fact, like this being better in the laning phase by a small bit might actually compensate that pretty nicely, because do not underestimate how much the early laning phase matters. You barely miss W's in laning phase. 1% faster move speed, actually could be meaningful on this. Just a little bit less, time they get to react to you. Maybe you save 1 frame, that's enough for you. I think Recon is very clearly still going to be a viable champion in pro play. Yeah, I mean, pros will occasionally miss the RW, but it does not remove what Recon normally does, so I think he's still going to be totally fine. Minor buffs to Rengar in the jungle, so more fighter jungles getting small buffs. Rengar, we'd already seen a little bit of picks in pro play. Mostly just from like Moon on FlyQuest. He was pretty fringe. I'm sure there were other junglers who played him as well. But a 3 base armor buff is quite nice. Rengar often gets pretty low in the jungle. Here's the table. He takes 2.4% less damage in the early game as a result of these changes. This is definitely a meaningful change. Last time we saw like a 3 armor buff on something like this, or 3 armor nerf, it didn't tend to have that big of an effect on win rate. It was like under 1%. So Rengar probably gains like 0.6% win rate or something. It's not a lot. But, this matters. It can even matter late game when he's dueling like a Xayah or something that he ganks. Like maybe he survives the 1 extra auto attack as a result of the 3 armor. That can happen. I mean, it is not a 0 buff. I think that what's nice is that even though none of these changes are all that big in isolation, I think pros will say, okay, Gragas got nerfed, okay, Jarvan got nerfed, okay, Elise got nerfed, okay, Lucien got buffed, okay, Rengar got buffed, okay, Cinderhulk got nerfed. Let's just try stuff. Like, I think this will encourage pros to do new things in solo queue, to try new things in scrims, and even if the numbers changes weren't the direct reason for the difference in champ select, it'll be the indirect reason because they said, you know what, there are so many changes, let's just try stuff out again. I think there were enough different changes to overcome inertia. That's my opinion on it. We'll see what happens. So I think Rengar will probably see some scrims. And if he gets picked or not is going to be a result of how those scrims went. But like, this is enough of a buff combined with the other nerfs that people will try it. I can almost guarantee you almost every pro team at Worlds will try Rengar in scrims, as long as their jungler knows how to play Rengar. And he might get picked because scrims went well, but I don't know that answer because that's up to how the scrims went, and I literally can't project that in the future. Small buffs to Rise W. Now, it's actually very interesting that Rise W is the ability to get buffed because it's the only ability he can only cast once during an all-in, right? Your Q, you're casting every single spell. Your E is a really, really short cooldown. So Rise W has a very substantial ability power ratio buff. And so here's that table. Rise, I do believe, keeps W at rank 1 for a very long time. So up until level... I mean, it's like 14 or 15 or something. It's a really, really late game. I think it actually is at level 15, his second point in W goes in because there's only 2 points in the ultimate, and there's 6 points in Q. So at level 15, the damage finally goes up by 20, basically. What you're seeing that the 0.4 AP ratio increase is a really substantial buff in the damage. Again, it's a spell you only hit once during an all-in. But hey, he's gaining some extra burst in the kit. Definitely means something, definitely meaningful. Are we going to see Rise in pro play? I don't know. I think he'll get some attempts. I think we saw Rise once in a while in pro, even after the most like recent nerfs. He's definitely super, super fringe, like pretty much outside the metagame entirely. I don't think Rise is going to become like strong in solo queue as a result. I don't think he's going to become strong in pro play either. But look, getting a 0.4 AP ratio on your full combo is good. That's substantial damage. I mean, this is a guy who often wants to buy tier and Rod of Ages and all this kind of stuff. And so he's going to have like 400 ability power by mid to late game. And that's 160 damage on your burst combo. That is a non-trivial amount of damage. So, I mean, definitely meaningful Rise buff. It's probably like a 1% win rate or more increase in solo queue. We'll see what happens. All right, Tristana, definitely, if Kallista's the #1 marksman in pro play, Tristana's #2. These were kind of the 2 queens of pro play. And there's basically a pretty... it's actually not that substantial. There is a somewhat meaningful nerf to her E. Basically, the bonus attack damage ratio got nerfed by 0.05 per rank up, which means it's eventually nerfed by a 0.2 bonus attack damage ratio. Now, this nerf is not as big as you might think, because remember, it's a bonus AD ratio, not a total AD ratio. The ability already has a base damage, and, and Tristana is a double Zeal user. I mean, the only attack damage she ever gets is Infinity Edge until her 4th item, which is then like a Last Whisper or a Scimitar or something like that. So very frequently, you're only dealing with like 78 bonus attack damage or so. So I did not quite fair math. Okay, so this is just if you have 100 bonus AD, right? Here's the damage difference of a full charged E, right? If you E and you hit them 4 times, this is the damage of that ability. At 100 bonus attack damage, it is 10% weaker. Wow. Now, again, keep in mind, 100 bonus attack damage is Infinity Edge, Full Runes and Masteries, Doran's Blade, you know, Berserker's Greaves, Static Shiv, Rapid Fire Cannon, right? Like, most of your full build is 100 bonus attack damage. So for most Tristana games, she's losing 44 damage. Insane. Yeah, not insane, obviously. All right. Here's the interesting stuff, though. This little bit right here to the right. And unless I did my math wrong, and it's possible I did my math wrong, but unless I did my math wrong, I took a level 18 Tristana, and I gave her Infinity Edge and a Lord Dominic's Regards. So she's at 5 items. She's got 1 slot left, and even that slot might just be like a Banshee's Veil. Okay, it's not a Banshee's Veil. Anyway, you've got 1 open slot. You're level 18. You're almost full build. I'm counting your crit chance. I'm counting everything. If you press E and throw out 4 auto attacks, counting critical strike chance, you're going from 2,428 damage to 2,375 damage. I mean, you're losing 50 damage on an all-in worth 2,400. Not a huge nerf, is it? It's not. This does not in any meaningful way hurt her late game. Again, this ability does, I mean, hey, 400 something damage is still 400 something damage. That's meaningful. That is not trivial. But you're doing 2,000 damage across those 4 autos in the first place because you're auto attacking them. This nerf is not huge. It is not huge. You're losing a 0.2 bonus attack damage ratio on 4 auto attacks. So you're losing a total of a 0.8 bonus attack damage ratio every like 15 seconds. And that bonus attack damage can only ever be like 130. Not huge. What it does do though is it nerfs her mid game because she buys her Infinity Edge first, has that 90 bonus AD, and then scales with her crit. So this definitely troughs her mid game. This can actually matter a little bit in her early laning phase as well. It's not going to hurt any of your last hitting really in any really meaningful way, and rank 1 of E is untouched, in the first place regardless. But she'll be a little bit less good at killing turrets because you can't crit turrets. That explosion when you shoot the turret 4 times. Sometimes you used to get caster minis, maybe you don't quite as much anymore. So there are some breakpoints where it starts to matter a little bit. But I mean, this is not remove Tristana anyway. This is probably a less than 1% win rate decrease in solo queue. Actually, it's probably a solid 1% win rate decrease in solo queue. Probably a solid 1% win rate decrease. But it's not like this is the kind of nerf that like it looks big on paper, and it's gonna again have that solo queue impact. But like, I don't think pros are gonna care about this, and they're gonna keep picking Tristana, and she's gonna feel the same. She's gonna feel almost identical as the champion, and she's still the late game hyper carry, so like that's still gonna exist as well. Change to Rumble. Now you can see when you are going to overheat with a Q or W. That's kind of cute. That's kind of nice. I like that. Cool. Great. It's not going to mean anything, but I mean, it's nice to have, right? Okay, Cinderhulk is losing 25 HP. This is something that I really like to do. Okay, I like to compare and contrast items across patches. Right, so 7.8 was before any of the changes this season. I mean, the last time Cinderhulk got changed for 7.8 was like in 6 point something. So we came into the spring split with this Cinderhulk. It had 460 health after the bonus HP. This was the champion burn. This is the monster burn. This is how much MP5 from the jungle. This is what Balmy Cinder cost, and the damage it dealt to jungle monsters, how much it cost, all these things. And then 7.9, there were changes to Balmy Cinder and champion burn, and immolate mechanics in general. Balmy Cinder remained the same, basically. The radius went down from 400 to 325. This is when we were nerfing Sunfire Cape, basically. So the radius went down from 400 to 325. Cinderhulk itself lost champion damage. Generally speaking, we weren't going to buy it level 1, so this was basically less damage. But the monster damage got increased really heavily, right? So in 7.9, Cinderhulk got better at clearing the jungle. Still cost 2625. By the way, I'm counting 1625 because I'm not counting the basic jungle combine. I'm only counting the cost of the enchant itself. But just for clarification. And then 7.13 were the big changes. 7.13 was the big metagame change, where suddenly Gragas should have been going Cinderhulk, not Runic Echoes, and Maokai finally got good again, and Zac got reworked and was really good again, and all this stuff came in, and suddenly Cinderhulk was super insane. It got 200 gold cheaper, it got more bonus HP attached to it, and because it was 200 gold cheaper, you could buy half a ruby crystal and make up the health difference. So, you know, the cost and health can basically just be wiped away, and you just are stuck with more bonus health at the end of the day. The champion burn and the monster burn stayed the same, but the MP5 got better, and the Bomby Cinder got cheaper. So what's interesting is, again, the cost and health basically equaled out, right? 7.13 happened, and this basically became the same. You just basically bought half a ruby crystal less. So these can cancel out, but you still got 5% more bonus health on all further purchases. Meaningful. You gained quite a bit more mana regen on your Tracker's Knife or whatever, and Bomby's Cinder gained more damage to jungle monsters and got 200 gold cheaper. All right, so these were the three changes that really mattered. And go, wow. And suddenly the metagame was Cinderhulk junglers unless you were playing literally Elise. Right, and every jungler was like, you can only play this champions, you have to play this. It was funny because when 7.13 came out, I remember casting Rift Rivals, and all the Gragases were still going Runic Echoes with this version of Cinderhulk, with 7.13 Cinderhulk, because inertia is a thing, and pros are slow to change. No one realized how much better Cinderhulk was until 7.14 and 15 and 16, and of course now you literally never see Runic Echoes Gragas. And what was ironic is in 7.13 with the best Cinderhulk, you were still seeing Runic Echoes Gragas because inertia. And it's something I'm going to bring out because here we're in 7.18, and I'm going to bring up inertia again. Okay, so, wow, 7.13 got all these buffs, and then 7.18, right, there were nerfs in 7.16, there were nerfs in 7.18, all these things. Okay, well, it lost 30 health, well, it lost 25 health, and with the 20%, it's really 30 health. It got 75 gold more expensive, and now, okay, now we can compare these things, right? We can compare these two items, and say, okay, well, for 125 gold less, I get 100 less health. Well, that's not gold efficient. Okay, so my health got worse. My bonus HP got worse. Okay, that's cool. So I have that scaling. I have more mana regen and I have a better Bomby Cinder. Okay, so I still keep these buffs, but I directly lost stats, right? And you can see, like, if you look at this Cinderhulk in 7.9, you're paying 400 gold for the bonus health, for the champion burn, for the monster burn, for the jungle MP5, for the Bombies, and now you're paying 540 for these stats, right? You're paying 540 for, generally speaking, stronger things. At the end of the day, like, if you're willing to pay 400 for this, are you willing to pay 500 for that? I mean, you're not getting a better burn, but you're getting a bit better bonus health. You're getting a bit better mana regen. Like, I mean, the Bomby Cinder you're not paying for, but it's still part of the build path. At the end of the day, I think it's like inconclusive. Like, I don't have a good thesis for you. But I mean, I think these are actually quite a bit more comparable in power. I think Cinderhulk in 7.18 is pretty close in overall power to Cinderhulk in 7.9. Maybe it's a bit stronger because Tracker's Knife and Bomby Cinder feel better to sit on, and because the percent bonus health thing is going to keep scaling you throughout the game. Like, those definitely can be meaningful things. But I basically what I'm trying to say is I don't think Cinderhulk just as an item is now overpowered or is overpowered anymore. And I think people who tell you that you have to go Cinderhulk still, I think, are wrong. One thing I want to point out, this is going to be actually a bit of a biased statistic. I looked at Jarvan Jungle's win rates, and across basically all games, Warrior Enchant Jarvan wins more than Cinderhulk Enchant Jarvan. Now, there's two reasons this could be the case. Number one is Warrior is actually better than Cinderhulk, and people are wrong, and that could be the case. Or people who snowball and are doing well and start the game 4-0 just go Warrior. Unsurprisingly, people who go 4-0 are really good at winning games. Because you got 4 good ganks off, you're probably going to win. So there's definitely some bias in the Cinderhulk versus Warrior debate there. But Warrior was reliably winning more in solo queue. Either way, I think legitimately Cinderhulk is not a mandatory enchant anymore. I think you can completely reasonably go Warrior Jarvan. We actually saw Warrior Rek'Sai get played by Cloud9 in the regional qualifier. I think in their last game of the regional qualifier to go to Worlds, so we were already seeing some people already make the switch to go Warrior Enchant on their fighter junglers, and I think this continues that trend. If you want to play Cinderhulk, like, this is not enough of a nerf that if you're playing Cinderhulk in 7.16 that you're going to suddenly change in 7.18. You're not like, oh, I can't go Cinderhulk anymore. The item is too nerfed. Like, dog, it lost 25 health. and everyone went Cinderhulk last patch. So you should never buy the argument that Cinderhulk got overnerfed, because that would be ludicrous. That's completely unrealistic to say that. But I do think Warrior can now be the option on some of these champions. Okay, that was a very long tirade on Cinderhulk, but it's something that I care a lot about in figuring out, did things get over-nerfed or over-buffed? How much inertia were there from pro players or solo queue players, and where are we now? Okay, so one thing the internet loves to complain about is that Ancient Coin seems to be overpowered. I don't know if it really is overpowered. Ancient Coin definitely earns the most gold of all of the support gold generation items. However, it grants the least stats of all the support gold generation items. So unless you are earning more gold than the items give stats, it's not a better item. But it's very easy to say, oh, this earns 600, that earned 400, 200 more gold, better item. It's like, well, but this one gives 20 ability power, which is worth 400 gold. So, better item. Anyway, Spell Thieves, though, has been underperforming. You know, I personally like playing a lot of Zyra and Brand and champions like that, and, you know, harassing as Sona and whatnot. So I like seeing aggressive supports get buffed, because it's one of my favorite kind of champions to play. End of the day, there were bigger buffs that were potentially considered. They didn't end up coming through. But Frostfang now has 10 CDR on it. So the tier 2 Spell Thief item just got buffs. You just get 10 CDR now. That does not carry through to Frost Queen's claim. It keeps the 10 CDR it used to have. In fact, if you are to poach this item into the mid lane, you actually get a bit nerfed, because less hitting a minion turns off tribute charge generation for a bit longer. End of the day, this is a small nudge to buff Zyra, or Brand, or whatever, right? Maybe you go Spell Thieves, excuse me, on Nami, because you can get to 10 CDR a bit easier. And I mean, spending 500 gold on 10 CDR and some ability power and stuff is maybe worth it. I know a lot of players like to go for Ruby Sightstone. I don't think Ruby Sightstone is actually very good, but a lot of players like to do that. And so if you wanted to go Ruby Sightstone, you can now buy a Frostfang for 10 CDR, and that feels pretty good. Build path change doesn't mean all that much. It's just a result of this change. I mean, this, again, it technically does buff Zyra and Brand. These buffs are not very big. It definitely buffs Bard, who is almost always going to go for a Spell Thief's line, so that's kind of nice. Again, it's not a very large change. Again, the idea is that you can like sit on tier 2. I don't think it's going to change pro perception at all. But it's nice because this line was definitely weak, so it's nice to see some buffs on it. Okay, Gargoyle Stone Plate. Okay, we're going to unpack a couple of things first. Okay, there's a bug fix where Cinderhulk and Gargoyle Stone Plate multiplied each other and gave more health than was required. So this was a unfortunate or whatever extra buff to Cinderhulk. I mean, everyone who was playing Zac and whatever and Sejuani in the jungle were getting a Gargoyle Stone Plate anyway themselves, so they were accidentally overpowered. So this further nerfs Cinderhulk junglers. Also, Stoneborn Pact and Nunu, similar situations here. They are multiplying each other. Not that people are playing a lot of Nunu, but Stoneborn Pact was actually somewhat common on champions like Sejuani. So these are, you know, these are just sort of direct nerfs to very strong Cinderhulk junglers. Okay, the big change is this one. The way Gargoyle Stone Plate used to work in 7.17 is it took your sum total of your health, let's say 4,000, and said, okay, you have 4,000 bonus health now. 4,000 more bonus health. Bonus health. And if you had very large bonus health ratios, that could be a problem. Now it says if you have 2,000 base health and 2,000 bonus health, you now have 4,000 base health and 4,000 bonus health instead of 2,000 base, 6,000 bonus. Again, what this means is, if you had very large bonus health ratios, this was overpowered. What was surprising to me is the actual smallness of the impact that this has. So I looked at Cho'Gath, and I said, okay, Cho'Gath, you're level 18, and you have at least 6 feast stacks, and that is 960 bonus health on Cho'Gath. And I said, okay, well, if you're a Cho'Gath with 960 bonus health, if you popped Stone Plate in 7.17, you did 1,035 damage to champions with Feast. And this was just 6 Feast stacks and nothing else in the inventory. This is literally Stone Plate, Boots of Speed, and like a Frozen Heart. In 7.18, that number becomes 842. Still a very large amount of damage. Let's be real, it's still quite a lot of damage, but it is a cut of 19%. Okay. and I did in increments of a ruby crystal, 150 more, 150 more, 150 more. If Cho'Gath has 3,800 bonus health, then now Cho'Gath has like 1,940 base HP, so this is like a 5,700 health Cho'Gath before Stone Plate. If you were a 5,700 health Cho'Gath before Stone Plate, your Stone Plate ultimate did 1,600 damage. It now does 1,400 damage. These numbers still look bonkers insane, but it is still a 12% nerf in damage. That is definitely meaningful, considering that's like roughly the health bar of a Sivir. And okay, now maybe the Sivir lives just barely. Again, still does a lot of damage. Still does a lot of damage. I mean, the base damage on Feast is 650, right? Like, it already does 650 true damage by just pressing R on somebody. It's a high damage ability. Now, keep in mind, it's always on this damage. That's always been the case. Obviously, Stone Plate is a strong item. Obviously, this damage is still very high. Yes, Cho'Gath is still going to be very strong, but considering that top lane Cho'Gath ended up being a pretty big carry, and a pretty commonly picked tank that had good late game scaling for pro play, this is a meaningful nerf. It cuts, again, about 200 damage. I mean, at all times, right? Like, keep in mind, it's Feast has a 10% bonus health ratio, and Cho'Gath has between like 600 and 1940 base HP. So it is just going to be 10% of whatever his base health is at that level is always going to be the difference in damage. So it's, you know, between 60 and 190 or whatever the number is. Not that you can get Feast level 1, so 60 is a bit unfair to say, but meaningful. Cho'Gath can still do insane damage, but moves the needle. Final item changes to Knight's Vow. 100 gold off the cost. 100 health off the item. Now, health costs like 2.7 gold per health, so this is a downgrade in efficiency. And so let's look at Knight's Vow over time. 7.11, before all the changes came in, this is when Knight's Vow never got bought, in 7.11 when it had health regen on it and all these stats. And then 7.12 comes around and it gives it CDR, and suddenly everyone buys it every single game on every single tank champion. You started seeing Knight's Vow on top lane tanks, and it was like this new thing. Like, oh my god, Huni got Knight's Vow on a Maokai top? That's crazy. And then 7.18 is the most recent one. It had already gotten health nerfs before. It lost 50 health a while ago, and now it lost some more. So what I want to point out, by the way, is the actual numbers on the gold efficiency of the base item went from 92% when it first came out, when it was everywhere, and it's now at 78% just for the health, armor, and CDR. Again, if you are near a partner, you gain 20 extra armor, so that's another 18% efficiency, which means you're sitting at, 96.2% gold efficient, just if you're just chilling. 92.6, not a bad efficiency. And then you have, of course, the partner heal and the partner tanking, which is going to make up the rest of it. So, I mean, this item is clearly still very worthwhile and efficient, but because I like looking at the history of the items, right, just by partnering, this item was 110% gold efficient just with the 20 armor here. So, I mean, this was definitely a very, 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 very strong item before. I mean, even with this one as well, again, the item used to be 111% gold efficient. I mean, it was still 98% gold efficient with the health regen on. So what's funny, actually, if you look at Knight's Vow from 7.11 and compare to 7.18, if you literally had no health regen at all, if this stat was eliminated from the item, the Knight's Vow from 7.11 is as gold efficient as the Knight's Vow from 7.18. So again, I talk about pros and inertia, right? No one was buying Knight's Vow in 7.11. Now, you could say that was a champion select issue. You know, what if tank supports weren't viable? Except, you know, of course they were with Tahm Kench and Alistar. What if tank tops weren't viable? Well, of course they were with Gnar and Maokai. What if tank junglers weren't viable? Well, of course they were. You know, Gragas existed. But inertia. 7.12 happened. People realized Knight's Vow existed. And to be fair, item was overpowered. So now we live in a world where in 7.18, where the Knight's Vow is only gold efficient with the partner aura, which is the world we lived in 7.11. If you literally had no value of health regen, it's the same item. And gold efficiency, right? You're getting 150 health at cost of 10 CDR. Those are very similar costed stats. Which means I think we probably still see 7.18. And again, inertia is the reason, because people know Knight's Vow is good. Anyway, the goal behind this change, by the way, and it's also written up here, is to try to make the item less poached, right? the item, much like Gargoyle Stoneplate, is not efficient in a 1v1 lane. If you're playing Maokai up against a Fiora and you buy a Knight's Vow, Fiora should be able to beat you in the 1v1 because you spent a lot of money on a 78% gold efficient item. Like, if you buy Knight's Vow and a Gargoyle Stoneplate in the top lane as Maokai, you have lost so much gold efficiency buying magic resist and an inefficient armor item against a Fiora. Like, that, in my mind, should be the goal, right? It's like, if I'm an AD carry, if I'm playing Ashe, and I buy a Last Whisper, and you buy a Zeal, I should lose to Twitch, right? We could be the same champion. We could play a Twitch mirror. If I buy a Last Whisper and you buy a Zeal, you should win. Much like if the Maokai and the top lane against Fiora buys a buys a Gargoyle Stoneplate, buys a Knight's Vow, he should lose his duels. And that's where it should live. Hopefully that's where it lives now, right? He was supposed to have to buy a Frozen Heart or a Thornmail or a Randuin's or whatever to start the matchup. You know, that's the goal, and hopefully it lives there. Knight's Vow, again, clearly still viable based on these numbers, but definitely inefficient without the partner, which I think is pretty fair. Some updates to champion select, that's pretty cool. Invasion continues to rotate in game mode. By the way, this champion, or this game mode is really, really, really fun. I recommend everyone start playing it if you haven't already. It's pretty awesome, and it's going to run for several weeks still, which is pretty great. And you can play all your star guardians, which is pretty exciting. Again, this game was actually really fun. I recommend everyone start playing it if you haven't yet. Bug fixes, almost none of these actually mattered. I read through them before. They don't seem to mean very much. So I'm going to skip through them. If you want to read them yourself, you certainly can. Championship Ashe and Eternum Cassiopeia showing up. That's going to be pretty cool. Also some chromas for Ashe and Draven, specifically. This is, I forget the reason you get this chroma, the golden chroma. Either way, pretty cool stuff. And that's the patch. So if you like the rundown, let me know. We ran over an hour long, but I went on my rants about pros with inertia and not switching up when things actually change. I think this is going to be a pretty successful patch for 7.18. I might release a video a bit later on talking about what I think the metagame is going to turn into, what kind of stuff we're going to see in pro play. But either way, I hope you enjoyed the rundown. I think this is a pretty good patch, especially when you consider it's for pro play. I think nothing suddenly became the best. I think nothing got removed from the game via the buffs and nerfs, so I think it should be pretty exciting to see what comes through. Thanks for watching. Leave me some comments below, or hit me up on social media over on that side of the screen, and I'll see you next time. Bye.